Trish and Rob McGregor welcome you to a place where all kinds of phenomena flourish. Voices whisper ancient secrets, signs and symbols are abundant. UFOs, ETs, ghosts, and even the dead move about freely. Here we meet authors, researchers, and investigators of the mysterious, the strange, and of the inexplicable anomalies that surround us. Step out of the everyday world and take a journey into the mystical underground.
Welcome to the Mystical Underground. Thank you for joining us. This is Trish McGregor and
Rob McGregor.
And our tech magician producer, John Posey.
John Posey with the window open, so okay. I didn't want to talk too much, but yep. Let's
okay. You can go to the mysticalunderground.com where we make regular posts and where you can find out about our books. Our most recent nonfiction book is The Shift, Reports from the Mystical Underground. Trish's latest novel is White Crows, and Rob's latest novel is Tulpas, available in audio as well as print and ebook.
Okay, we want to welcome back Preston Dennett, who is the most prolific author of books about UFOs and aliens on planet Earth and maybe our galaxy and beyond. Who knows? Preston began investigating UFOs and the paranormal in 1986 when he discovered that his family, friends, and co-workers were having dramatic, unexplained encounters. Since then, he has interviewed hundreds of witnesses and investigated a wide variety of paranormal phenomena. He is a field investigator for the Mutual UFO Network, MUFON, a ghost hunter, a paranormal researcher, and the author of more than 30 books and more than 100 articles on UFOs and the paranormal. His latest book is Humanoids and High Strangeness, which we're going to talk about today. Thanks for joining us, Preston, again on the Mystical Underground.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, I want to begin by reading a few quotes from the book from witnesses, just short ones. So she looked like a praying mantis. I saw her face. I saw her hands. She had long fingers. She was very skinny. She looked like a praying mantis, and she was very tall. That's from Sandra. I never knew anything about grays. I didn't know what it was. It could have been the devil for all I knew. I had never seen anything like it. I never knew there was a creature out there that looked like that. I tried to resist. They had a hold of my arms and they took me through the wall. Pamela. Okay, this black cloaked lizard creature came out of the wall next to me. And then a second one, then a third. They came out of the wall. The feeling was so scary. I don't think I've ever felt evil like that in my whole life. That's Melissa. Okay, that's quotes I want to start. So Preston, what's going on? Are these real physical beings that can go through walls? I mean, is this imaginary creatures, or are these like waking nightmares or nightmares, or are these physical beings? Or both?
Yeah, well, I think the evidence is pretty clear that we're dealing with physical beings who do have amazing abilities to do things like walk through walls. Yeah. But the fact is, these witnesses are being physically affected. They can, feel it when these beings perhaps hold their arms, and they're missing from their rooms when people are looking for them, or wherever they might be. These are leaving medical effects, landing traces. I mean, this is a physical experience, 100%. While there may be interdimensional aspects to it, what isn't interdimensional on this planet? Every entity has interdimensional aspects to it, including us.
Right. What's interesting is not only can they walk through the walls, but they can take people through the walls too, right? That's how do they do that?
Well, that's the $1 million question, isn't it? I expect.
What does that feel like?
Yeah.
Well, there are people on Earth who have experienced this. There is a medium, or was, by the name of Carlos Mirabelli, who was Brazil's greatest medium, who had that ability and displayed it in front of scientists.
Really? Wow.
Actually walked through
that
walls.
Must have made him popular.
Yeah. He was very well known in his country, certainly. This has happened to other people who are so-called enlightened masters, or even to a schoolgirl in England, Janet Harper, who was experiencing really strong poltergeist activity. I believe she was probably an untrained medium and was pulled through the wall. So this could be done by psychic means, or honestly, I think they have the technology to do this. They have an understanding of the electromagnetic spectrum, the ETs do, and can do things with it that border on miraculous, like levitating a person or healing them or pulling them through solid objects.
Yeah, I've seen read descriptions of people with out-of-body experiences who go up through the walls and they can see the material in the wall and the roof or whatever. But this is from a physical state right through. So that's even more impressive than just an out-of-body state.
Preston, I had an experience I want to get your opinion on. In 2001, a friend and I went to Eric Pearl's workshop where he teaches you certain hand gestures on how to heal yourself. And he instructed each of us to take a stranger as a partner. And so the woman that I was with, I didn't know her. And as she passed her hands over me, all of a sudden the top of my head blew open and a beam of light shot out through the ceiling. And at the top of the ceiling, I thought I saw 3 alien creatures peering down. They weren't hostile. They were actually just curious, I think. And I thought, okay, wow, this is pretty interesting. And then it happened again 4 years later during Hurricane Francis, when Rob and Megan and all the animals were asleep and I'm laying awake in bed listening to the shrieking wind. And I thought, oh my God, are we going to wake up in the morning with no windows, no door? And I shut my eyes and they were there again. So I've come to identify them as sort of comforting. So what is that? I mean,
that's a loaded question, Trish. I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. But yeah, I mean, this is definitely how a lot of people do have contact, is telepathic. They are watching over us, and you can sense them if you're well connected to them. And as far as healing and hand movements, yeah, this is something a lot of contactees experience, coming back from their experiences with the ability to do what we would call hands-on healing or Reiki. There is an absolute ability that is often channeled, I guess, through our hands to put out healing energy, which I believe is probably from essentially the astral realms.
Well, I've been waiting for them to come back. Yeah.
But I mean, this doesn't surprise me at all, because I've heard of a lot of similar accounts where they are benevolent and trying to help and heal or protect in many ways.
Yeah. So I was talking to Trish about your book yesterday, and I was reading it. One thing that I kept reading and was kind of freaking me out is these people, especially when they're teenagers, were having a lot of nosebleeds. And when I was a teenager, I had a lot of nosebleeds. I just thought it was a regular thing that people had nosebleeds, and then it stopped. But I've never had any sense of awareness of being abducted or having an implant, but that's usually what that's related to, an implant, isn't it, with the nosebleeds?
Yeah, it certainly is. It's one of the questions I do ask people when I'm trying to determine if they've had contact or not, because it does turn up fairly regularly. And yeah, and in the sinus cavity is a very common place for these implants, which I think are health related. There's a lot of speculation about implants, but I can tell you that the contactees I've talked to, some have been told directly from the ETs themselves that it's health related. So with lots of people speculating, oh, it's for tracking or mind control.
Right.
I'm like, where's your evidence for that? Is this what the ETs told you? Have you any evidence of that whatsoever? No, they don't. So I think it's just an important point, because the word implant is kind of a trigger word for some people.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. So your title is Humanoids and High Strangeness. What is your definition of humanoids?
We
You.
are, yeah,
Us and who else?
we ourselves are strange humanoids, certainly. But yeah, this is something that's very interesting to me, and I think has really profound implications, is that when people report ETs, almost always, without exception, I mean, of course, there are a few exceptions, but almost always, people report humanoids, bipedal beings with arms and legs and a head and so forth, and looking very much like us, with eyes and nose and mouth and so forth, which, there are, of course, many different variations here going on. But it appears that we all share a common heritage. And this is a very common message contactees get. So I'm not even sure we're different species, but I would say perhaps different ancestries, and profoundly different in appearances, certainly, from very, very tall beings up to 15 feet even, to very short, as little as 2 feet, or even smaller in some cases. But usually somewhere around 4 to 7 feet, humanoids of all kinds.
Right. But you wouldn't include the reptilian aliens in that category, would you?
They're hardly humanoid.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, they are humanoid.
Oh,
The
really?
reptilians. They've
Okay.
got arms and legs. They're walking
Okay.
around.
Okay.
So what, we all share common DNA on this planet. I just read something recently which made me laugh, but half of the DNA in humans is identical to bananas. So,
Yeah,
I mean, this
Well,
is,
that says a lot.
and I'm not, I'm not trying to be facetious. It's true. We have long strands of DNA that are equal to celery. The bonobo and the chimpanzees are 99% identical. And look how different we look.
Yeah.
So this is all life on this planet. And frankly, I think other planets has DNA. So this is what I mean by profound implications. When we have people reporting ETs that look just like us, just like humans, indifferentiable, if that's a word, undifferentiated. That, I mean, what does that say about human origins? Do we even evolve on this planet? I am not so sure.
Yeah, I'm not either.
Well, that also,
all kinds.
Yeah, when they look identical to us, that also opens the question of whether they are from this earth, and military related possibly. And they've also been accused of doing implants as well. But
some are masquerading as ETs. Our government is doing nefarious things. This is why I think some of the contactee accounts are quite negative, and this whole phenomenon is getting a bad name, because there's an ET threat narrative being put forth by our, quote, secret governments.
Right. Yeah.
Preston, you have in this book your first story about this Richard Simon, the pseudonym. That's fascinating. 4 generations. Now tell us about that.
No, that is
How
his
did
real
you
name,
find
by
this
the way.
guy?
Yeah.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Yeah. I asked, I always ask the witnesses, is it okay if I use your name? And surprisingly, more and more people are like absolutely fine with it. So
yeah,
good.
I was going to ask you that, because it does seem like people are more willing to talk now.
Yeah, which I'm so glad about, because so many people are having this experience. Time for, ridicule and disbelief and skepticism and denial, that's over. We have the evidence.
Yeah.
And Richard Simon's case is a really interesting one. To me, the biggest takeaway is the reason you mentioned 4 generations.
4 generations. And they always happen at age 7. That's what I found so interesting.
Yeah, isn't that
What's magical about 7?
It's a common age, somewhere around 4 to maybe even 12 is when contact usually starts. Perhaps earlier, honestly, but people don't always remember before age 4. But Richard's case is so fascinating because it almost slid under his radar, for a good number of years. At age 7, he was fine, and then woke up the next morning with anxiety and could not sleep after one night, age 7, for no reason he could fathom. Could not sleep at night. Was just had terrible insomnia, fear of intruders, felt like someone was watching him, and could not figure it out for years. Literally would take naps during the day because he couldn't sleep at night. And no one knew what to do about it until around age 20, I think it was 22 or so. His mom, Ines, decided she's going to quit smoking and she's going to go visit a hypnotist by the name of Retha. Gosh, I forget her last name. But she's a experienced hypnotherapist.
Mm-hmm.
And Ines says to her son, Richard, hey, you've got insomnia. You should join me. Maybe she could help. And he didn't want to do it, but she convinced him. And so they went to see Retha, and Ines went in first, and Richard waited in the waiting room and heard his mom crying and screaming a little bit through the walls of the office there. Yeah, he was concerned. And finally his mom comes out. She's a little teary-eyed. It's like, what's wrong, Mom? She says, you know what? I'm fine. Your turn. You go in. and he was very curious, of course, naturally, but went in to see the hypnotist, who wouldn't say anything about his mom. Not yet. So she asked him, what's up with your insomnia? Why can't you sleep? And he said, I have no idea. It just happened at age 7. And she asked him various questions about his family life. He's like, listen, I've got a great family. I've got loving parents. I love my siblings. I'm well adjusted. You did well in school. There was no reason for this. She says, okay, let's go under hypnosis. And put him into a trance, which took, a good 20 minutes, half hour. And, hypnosis is poorly understood, I think, by the public. It's just a state of relaxation. And so he had gotten relaxed, and then she asked him, why can't you sleep? And he instantly saw bright lights shining down at him. And then inhuman faces, or grays, essentially, is what they were. And just like that, the dam broke. She did not lead him in any way, didn't have to say a darn thing. And he remembered being pulled on board. He woke up in the house that night, and it was filled with light. He's searching around. He couldn't find his mom. She was not in bed. His dad had the night shift. So he was quite concerned. And that's when the front doors opened and there were grays. And the next thing he knows, he's on board a craft. It's being physically examined. It's quite cool in there. The peculiar odor, like a sort of clammy fish tank, is how he described it. Metallic walls, indirect lighting, a lot of the details we hear about. And he was quite frightened, unable to move, and sort of whimpering and screaming. And one of the there was short little grays, a tall gray, and a very tall gray. And one of the grays came up to him and said, what's the matter, child? And he said, I'm cold and I want to go home. And they said, well, you'll go home soon. We're almost done. And that was repeated a few times as they were working on his stomach. And at one point, he heard a woman screaming, letting out a stream of curses. The other little grays went to attend to her. Later, of course, he realized that was his mother. And, that was, in essence, the experience in a nutshell. But
except he got mad, right, when he came out of the trance. He thought she had put him into that, led him into that state.
Yeah, I had to include that part because it was important. During the whole session, which kind of came in a little bit out of order, but finally he did remember, because she asked him, how did this all begin? And that's when he remembered the ETs coming into the house. And he became very frightened. That was the most frightening moment. And he leapt off the couch and approached Retha and said, how dare you? You put this in my head. You put all of this in my head. This didn't happen. How dare you do this? And he was livid with anger. And she said, listen, calm down. I did not do this. I didn't say a word. This is being tape recorded. You will have the tapes. You can review them. He's like, this is a dream. This didn't happen. She's like, it did happen because your mom remembered exactly what you're recalling, which, comparing notes later, yeah, their experiences absolutely corroborated each other's. But
So
he
they were
calmed
both
down.
taken.
Yeah. Yep. He calmed
Mhm.
down and basically said, I'm sorry. You're right. But speaking with his mother, she's like, honey, I had an experience at age 7 as well, where she was in the barn on a farm, and I think it was Kentucky or thereabout, and had an encounter, a face-to-face encounter with a strange being at age 7.
Mm-hmm.
Now, of course, he grows up, gets married, has kids, is
Mhm.
watching TV about grade, and his 7-year-old daughter, Sarah, comes running into the room and says, drops her Barbies, and comes running into the room and says, Daddy, Daddy, I need to talk to you. He's like, no, honey, I am busy. And she said, no, Dad, it's important. I need to talk to you now. Finally, he's like, what's the matter? And she points to the TV and says, that's what's coming into my room and poking my
God.
nose. And it was, of course, a gray. At that time,
Uh-huh.
she was experiencing some pretty severe nosebleeds.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, oh my God. And that, of course, time passed. She grew up, she got married, she had kids. Her kid reaches
Wow.
age 7, which was just a few years ago, and said, Mommy, there's a monkey man standing outside my window. It's coming into my room. It's got no hair, big dark eyes. Yeah, 4 generations, all at age 7.
Wow.
It's interesting.
So
Phenomenal.
interesting.
Yeah.
Well, now, how did they find you, or did you find them? How did you get this story?
They contacted me, had watched my YouTube channel, which is how
Uh-huh.
a number of people do contact me. Some are through my
Mhm.
books, some are from podcasts like yours, some are
Uh-huh.
direct referrals from friends and
Mhm.
family and coworkers. I mean, all different ways. I'll speak at a convention or something, and people might
Uh-huh.
come up to me or see me on TV.
Mm-hmm.
I have made a few TV appearances over the years. So
So
yeah, he
didn't
contacted me.
didn't Richard have
Hmm.
a brother too that was undergoing these experiences, or is
Uh,
is that another story?
I think that was
No,
another
no, that
story.
was
Oh,
another story. Yeah.
okay. Yeah, but there I can't remember which one that was, but the
Oh,
brother
I
has
remember. Yeah.
yeah, you remember. The brother has no recollection of any of this.
Yeah.
Maybe it's I'm not sure
That's
what
that
you know
was
what story
Ron
that was.
Johnson.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, right.
Who also let me use his real name.
Okay, right.
And I love that case. It's so interesting because there's some really interesting takeaways from that one as well.
Yeah, that
Um,
was
what's fascinating about what their experiences is they saw a variety of beings.
mhm,
They were just 2 little kids, starting around age 4 or 5, in their hometown in East Palo, Texas,
okay.
1970 or so. The room would fill with light. They shared a room, these 2 brothers.
Mhm,
Ron was 1 year older than his younger brother. And the room would fill with light, and in would walk this very tall being who reached the ceiling, sometimes even had to bend over. So I'm guessing he was either a tall white or a praying mantis, though honestly
Uh-huh.
they couldn't say because they never got a really good look. This very tall being would stand at the corner of the room, and in would come little grays, and then these short blue beings.
right.
Now, Ron
Hmm.
contacted me because he saw a drawing my sister-in-law had done of these little blue beings. He's like, that's exactly what I saw. I've been
Wow.
looking, and says, that's exactly it. And they're about 3 feet tall, flat faces, kind of wrinkly, thick looking skin, bluish, little tiny dark eyes, and wearing robes and a hood,
Mhm,
and carrying a wand in one hand, a glowing sort of wand-like object. And would come
Huh.
up to them and touch them with the wand, at which point they would usually black out. But
Hmm.
it's so interesting because this happened over and over and over again for years. And they had missing time many times, told their parents, who were very, very religious and didn't know how to interpret this, absolutely thought the kids were making it up. We're like, no, no, Mom, the room's filling with light. The mom walks to the window and says, well, look, there's this light that shines in through your window. They're like, no, Mom, the room is filling with light. And something
That has to be
very,
frustrating for a kid when your parents don't believe what you're saying.
yeah, note to all parents
That's,
out there. 'Cause this is
yeah,
happening.
really.
And you listen to your kids when they're saying this. So it's very frustrating for children without any recourse because they can't call somebody.
Mhm.
You know, who
No,
are they going to tell if their parents are not going to listen?
Right.
they're going
Uh,
to tell you, Preston.
Eventually, yeah, but it takes years for
Uh,
people to come to terms with this sometimes.
But now that with the internet, it's a lot easier for young people, especially to be
Yeah.
able to figure out and make connections that in times past, you're right, it would take years before they would start to realize that there's other people who have had these type of experiences.
Yeah. In fact, in the
Now,
book, there's
Preston,
a few very young people who contacted me who are
Oh,
just,
really?
like 18 or 19 and had their
Uh-huh.
experiences at age 14 or, younger, but
wow.
just a few years.
Have you ever
But
taken stories from people who are under 18? Do you do that?
I have, but only with parental
Yeah,
permission.
right. Yeah.
Mhm.
Because I'm like, no, I'm not going to interview them unless you're there,
Yeah, right.
standing next
Yeah.
to them.
Yeah. Okay.
Well,
But-
Preston, since you've been gathering all this information, do you have ETs visiting you at night?
Well, I think, yeah, I mean,
Have you been hypnotized yourself?
no, I have not.
Okay. All
I
right.
do think hypnotism works. I
Yeah.
stayed away from it for a number of reasons.
Mhm.
I do support it. I
Yeah.
have, on
Mhm.
occasion, referred people to hypnosis, but it's pretty rare
Mhm.
that I do that. And only if a person is suffering honest to God anxiety.
Right.
It's a very clear-cut case of missing time. Really want to do it.
Mhm.
And even before that, I will tell them, write everything down, everything that you
Mhm.
remember. So you do not conflate your hypnotically retrieved
Right.
memories with what you consciously recall. Meditate, try dream recall. Really consider this, because once you go that route, there's no going back. You
Right.
can open up a can of worms for people.
Right.
It can really cause you to question the veracity of your memories.
Mhm.
Mhm.
But no, I know it works. I think the
Yeah.
evidence is very clear on that in the right hands. I
Mhm.
haven't done
Right.
it because of the controversy surrounding it. In fact, in my books, I would say it's about 10%, maybe 20 in a few of the books, do have cases involving hypnosis, but the vast
Uh-huh.
majority do not. So
Mm.
I can tell
So
people
that,
with full confidence that hypnotically retrieved memories does not explain contact. It just
okay.
Right.
doesn't. This is
Because
not false memory syndrome.
so most of them
Mhm.
can consciously remember these events that in your book.
100%. Yeah,
Oh,
Ron Johnson and his little brother did. I just want
yeah.
to backpedal a little bit to that case because there's
Yeah.
something really interesting that happened to them. Is they would wake up in the morning wrapped up in their sheets like a
Uh,
burrito, like an inch, really tightly wound
Mhm.
up in their sheets to the point where their arms were, pasted to their sides and they couldn't move.
Wow.
They'd be flopping around like caterpillars. Mom, Dad, help! And their parents would come in and be like, "What did you do?" And I'm like, "It wasn't us. We didn't do this.
God.
It's the little blue man." And their parents would be like, "Stop it!" And it happened over and over again. And that happened. I had another guy in the book who called me after he read that chapter. He's like, "I'm so sorry I didn't tell you. That happened to me." I'm like, "Oh gosh, I forgot to ask him." But I have other
Huh.
cases of that exact same thing. They'll wrap you up in a blanket so tight you have to wiggle your way out. It's
Were these
bizarre.
also
That's
blues
funny.
who did it? Were they also
No,
these blues? No.
it
Okay.
was the gray ETs, but I think I
Uh-huh.
figured out why. I'm speculating, but I think they're doing it on purpose to basically leave a little bit of evidence.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
It says,
Yeah.
you know what, you were visited, figure this out. It's kind of a funny, it's almost a sense of humor, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, I
Yeah,
find it
really.
funny.
It's very weird.
High
It's just
strangeness, I'm telling you, that's part
yeah.
of this
It's just like
phenomenon.
like coming home with somebody else's pajamas. You know, that's I've heard stories about that too.
Yeah, I just read another case this morning about a guy in Tennessee, I think it was, who, or no, yeah, a lady who woke up with this T-shirt on, which they tracked it to Japan, a
Wow.
sporting event in Japan.
God.
So there's
Wow.
no way she could have had that. But apparently, some guy in Japan woke up with her shirt. I don't know.
You wonder if that's
Jeez.
intentional or like a joke, or they
Well,
just
it
don't
sounds
care.
like it is.
Or it could be they just don't know or don't care.
Well, I studied a bunch of cases and I came up with either it's a mistake,
Yeah.
or they just don't care, or it's intentional. I mean, I really don't know.
Yeah.
I it's hard
Maybe
to
it's like
say
the
for
wrapping
sure.
of the kids, like the wrapping of the kids in blankets. It's a piece of evidence.
Yeah, well, it's certainly good evidence, isn't it, when something like that
Yeah,
happens.
really. Now you had another story in here about these two kids. You had two stories from people in Puerto Rico. Both of those were interesting. How did you get those? Did they come to you also?
One gentleman, I think it's just one actually. There's a case from San Juan, Argentina. There's another from Peru, England, France,
Oh, that's right,
Germany.
Peru. Yeah.
But yeah, the guy from Puerto Rico, Abdil is his name, his case is quite recent. And he contacted me when I think he was 18 years old, and had an experience at age 14. And what's so interesting about his case is he hadn't had any experiences as a child, but just sat
No.
down one day to watch TV, and on came the TV program Hangar One about UFOs. He's like, wow, UFOs. He'd never even thought about them. And
Huh.
hopped on the internet. As you said, Rob, they now have a
Yeah.
recourse, and found out that where he lives, Puerto Rico, is pretty active, which is certainly true. And expressed a desire to have contact. I mean, really started thinking about it quite, all the time. He became a little bit obsessed with it. And with a week later, he had his first sighting.
Yeah.
So
I thought
he's
that
like,
was
that
pretty
can't
cool.
be a coincidence. Just
Yeah.
can't be. And at the same time, he started really becoming interested in telepathy and telekinesis and other sort of subjects that are related to this, certainly. And it wasn't long after that, his interest ramped up even more. And he's like, I'd really like to make contact. And he did. He had another sighting. And that was followed by more high strangeness events, such as unexplained knockings on his kitchen
Right.
window, at which point the kitchen light blinked twice, and weird stuff going on in his bedroom, more, unexplained sounds and a feeling of a presence. And it was shortly after that, the motion sensor light went on out in their backyard, and he didn't go out to investigate. He called his mom, and she went out, and the gate was opened, and he thought, well, that's strange, because it had been closed. But that's when they found a 6-foot wide circle in the grass that looked like something had come from above and landed. And it was quite prominent. He sent me the photographs of it. And
then he found that piece of jewelry. That was
yeah,
really interesting.
which said Bond and Company, which apparently is from a dog collar company, but there's none near there. So that's odd. And it's also odd because it wasn't there before. I talked to Whitley Strieber about this, because Abdil thought that this was a sign, this was an attempt at communication. And Whitley Strieber laughed. He's like, yeah, this is exactly the sort of thing they do. They communicate in roundabout, interesting ways.
Yeah.
And that's certainly how Abdil felt. And it was not long after that, he found another marking on his lawn, which he said looked like a ET portrait of this head with, eyes and a kind of a big head, triangular shaped. And again, he's thinking, I'm going crazy. Am I reading too much into this? What is going on? And he went out couple of evenings later to take another look at this and try to wrap his head around it. And that's to his amazement when he saw a very strange humanoid. And he described it, and I don't think I've ever heard one quite like it, but which is not all that unusual. But he said it was, very slender, quite short, 5 feet or so, maybe shorter, brown skinned, had a kind of a triangular head, largish eyes, no visible, oh no, it did have a nose and a mouth, but it wasn't wearing any clothes as far as you could tell. But it darted across that yard so fast, it said it may be just a few seconds, and was running in a very peculiar way with its arms kind of dangling behind it.
Yeah, that was weird.
And he didn't react the way he thought he would. He wasn't scared, but this was something you would normally go investigate, but he didn't for whatever reason. He now kicks himself because he had access. It ran into the neighbor's yard.
Right.
And he could have easily just walked over there and checked it out, but he didn't. So he wonders about that. But yeah, he's like, wow, did he initiate this encounter? And I think we have to consider that possibility, because he was.
It sounds like it.
He was really kind of trying to reach out to them.
And that's the same with the case of the guy in Peru. He seems to have. There seems to be a lot of paranormal connection with a lot of these cases. And the guy in Peru, he actually called them down to I think toward the later part of the story, where he sees the bright light, and then it comes right down close to him, and he was also hearing like a voice in his head, like communicating with him. And that you have quite a few of those, don't you, where they hear voices that seem to come from the beings?
Yeah, I'm not sure which case you're talking, whether it's the one in Argentina or Peru, because they both had that.
Okay, yeah. I was thinking I don't think I read the one in Argentina, but the one in Peru, it goes through his whole life from his childhood. And
that one is so interesting. Sebastian is his name. Sebastian Bulos.
Yeah.
And what a nice man, and very passionate. We did a very long, the main interview was quite long.
Yeah, because it's a long story too. I mean, it's through his whole life and right up to pretty much the present is where you end it. I mean, he's still, I think that his last experience was in 2022, but he's still searching,
I just heard back from him recently.
Okay.
So yeah, what an amazing guy who, had no prior experiences, but had reached a point in his life where he was having some difficulty. His parents had experiences, by the way, had seen UFOs. His mother saw a very close-up UFO right over during a party with a whole bunch of her relatives. Very close.
Yeah, it was large too, I think she said.
Your classic saucer. But he hadn't, and just had a passing interest in the subject. Certainly believed in it because he'd heard about, his parents' sighting, but had moved out of his house not too long ago. He had been taught English and became a tour guide with having English skills that worked well for him, but lost his job through no fault of his own, and ran out of money and couldn't get another job, and couldn't afford to eat meat anymore, which as he says in Peru is not easy because everyone's all about barbecues and sausage.
Yeah, right.
So he's on a vegetarian diet. He's praying to find a job. He's, nearing a point where he's in real trouble, and had gone out to hang up the laundry, and suddenly in his mind he saw this glowing orange yellow object, and it was weird because he could see it in his mind's eye, like remote viewing. It was north of where he lived in Lima, Peru. It's like, well, that's odd. He's like looking down on it from above. He's like, I recognize this area. This is not far from the airport, and it's coming towards me. He's like, why am I seeing this? It's in his head. And he was
Wow.
watching it get closer and closer. He's like, it's going to appear over my house if this keeps up. At which point he heard a phrase in his head in Spanish, which said, Mira el cielo. Look up, look at the sky. Yeah.
Right.
And he did. And that's when this object appeared. And
Huh.
he said it was amazing because it wasn't just an object. Inside of it, he could see this beautiful male figure, which was glowing. And he said, you know, it looked very much like Leonardo da Vinci's Vitruvian Man. I had to look that up
Interesting.
because I had, you know, vague recollections of that. But you know,
Right.
that's the figure with the arm,
Right. Yeah.
you know, the arm
Yeah.
stretched out like this, the
Yeah.
legs.
Right.
And he said it was this beautiful, muscular male figure, what
Huh.
we might call Nordic, though I don't really like that term. I would call it human looking, but very handsome. And instead of the arms being stretched out to the sides, they were stretched out in front in a kind of supplicating gesture.
Huh.
And as it
I
got close,
Yeah, I
Yeah.
wonder if that could be an implanted image too, that they don't really look like that, but that's what he wanted to appear to him as, for whatever
yeah,
reason.
I mean, I suppose that's a possibility, but I don't see any reason to speculate that
Yeah,
because so many people see these figures.
yeah, yeah,
People see grays and they look like grays. I mean, there are, of
yeah.
course, screen memories, but
Mhm.
I think we
Yeah.
have enough people reporting human-looking ETs and grays and praying mantids and reptilians and blue beings that is what they look like.
Yeah.
Preston, if you talk to this guy again, ask him if he knows where Markawasi is, especially if he's from Lima. Well, I'm curious, you know, I mean, people who live in Lima often haven't heard about Markawasi. It's a place that's about 30 or 40 miles north, I think, of Lima.
But it takes about 2 hours to get there.
Well, it takes a lot
Yeah,
more than that. If you have to
the
go by
roads,
donkey,
yeah, it's up in the mountains.
you know, to go up to the mountains. But anyway, there have been a
Markawasi.
lot of UFO sightings connected with Markawasi.
And there's rocks.
I'll type it out for you.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
rocks there that appear as humans and animals there, and the scientists don't
Nobody
know
knows who's.
whether they're some scientists say, well, this is just natural, and others say, no, these were carved that way. Markawasi is the name of the place.
No, he didn't mention it, but I would suspect he does know about it. He's a very
Yeah.
intelligent man who's done
Right.
his research, is really into this subject,
Yeah.
has tried very hard to get photographic evidence, and succeeded.
Mhm.
I mean, he's
Yeah.
gotten evidence.
One of the things I wanted to ask you about is now most of the people that you interview, or maybe all of them, they're kind of regular people. I mean, they don't. It's like the Grays or whoever. They're not going. At least the ones that have contacted you, they're not going to the power people, the influencers, but just regular folks. But what about the other side? Are there cases that you're aware of where people who are in positions of high power have also had these experiences?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. And I
Okay.
think if you look into the whole history of UFOs and UFO literature, you'll see that there are presidents, senators, representatives, governors, heads of state who all have had encounters, and that the ETs did go to them and tried very hard to communicate with them and get them to do the right thing.
Yeah.
And of course they didn't. And this is why they are doing what I would call a grassroots movement and going to the people.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. Yeah, these are normal people of all types. They're, housewives, nurses, police officers, artists. I mean, you name a profession, I'm sure I've got a case of it.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, the people they contact are doing really good work for humanity. Generally speaking, these are important people because they are nurses, they're teachers, they're environmentalists, they're animal rights activists, they are social workers. These are people who are working hard to help humanity. So I would call them, doers, movers and shakers in a way, but sort of under the radar.
Yeah.
not the leaders so much, but yeah, the
Yeah.
Mexican president had an encounter, so did the Brazilian president, president of a province in Russia. Of course, we've had 2 presidents, governors, many.
Right.
Just recently during the congressional hearings, one of the senators said, several of us have had encounters.
Okay.
I'm not going to name names. And I thought to myself, I wish you would.
Yeah.
That's time.
Really.
Yeah,
You're
they're a little
talking
more
about being truthful. Tell
Yeah.
us.
they're a little more secretive. We've been in contact recently with a woman who is involved in the international environmental movement, and so she has some very interesting cases, very detailed, but she doesn't want to use her name. You know, she's very concerned that this would people would just dismiss her from the work she's doing. So
Which is too bad. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, that's kind of a false premise.
Yeah.
But
I think,
that
these
is
days.
where the tide is really changing now.
Yeah.
And I think this is one of the big benefits of the so-called steps towards, just, I'm going to put in huge quotes, disclosure, because it's not, but it's having an effect on how people view all of this.
Right.
And it's got
Also,
a level of legitimacy.
That Netflix show Encounters is having an effect
Yeah.
too.
I just watched the first 3 episodes and I was surprisingly impressed.
Yeah, wait till you see the fourth.
It's well done.
Wait till you see the 4th one on Fukushima.
Fukushima.
Fukushima, that in Japan, that is very impressive.
Wow.
Yeah,
I really liked the one they did on the Rua Zimbabwe case. I wish they had called me. I could have told them a few things about the schoolyard encounters. I really could have. But
and what about that guy who was just denying it all and saying that he
who was he?
They kind of overplayed that guy, I thought, but you just wonder what.
So too.
Yeah, you just wonder why. They
maybe
never said
they felt they needed a skeptic. You know?
But they never said what he did, what he saw at the time, or was he interviewed at the time? Because there's no little kid saying, "Oh, I just made this up." There isn't any of that. It's all
there was.
Was there?
There was one scene. Yes, one scene.
Just that guy.
Kid.
Yeah.
I saw that
60.
And my immediate impression, even before he spoke, was his body language is a little off. I interviewed a lot of people, and he, I can't say for sure I haven't interviewed him, but I was not impressed.
I had the same feeling too about him. It's like he wanted the attention, saying, "I created this," and but 60 people, and he said he was pointing to a rock and said it's a alien craft.
Yeah, right.
And there's like, it wasn't. I know what a rock looks like. That was not a rock.
I mean, it's absurd.
I like the way. I like the way they showed John Mack, how he spoke to them. He really knew how to speak to these kids to draw them out.
What's so amazing is one of the teachers there had encounters.
Yes,
I thought
I think that was the head teacher. In fact, that came out.
Headmistress.
That came out in the encounter interview, because that wasn't out before. That's new.
And the guys asked her, "Do you want to come with us?"
Yeah, right.
Yeah, right.
She said, I'm gonna stay.
They came 3 times to her because she was living right on the campus there, and that was going on. So
isn't that amazing? Because that is new information that hasn't come out about this case.
Right. Yeah, that's new information on that case. Yeah.
It's so obviously a real case. That one witness is an absolute outlier. Or perhaps just a liar. I'm not going to say that, but definitely an outlier.
I think just a liar.
Yeah, like a plant.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. He's like a plant. He's the skeptic plant.
Right.
Yeah, I'd really like to dig deeper into who he is and why he's saying this, and if we can pin that down.
And see what kind of associations he has with skeptic groups or whatever.
Yeah.
So one of the things I wanted to ask you about that we haven't touched on, the little blues and maybe some of the grays, could they be biorobotic beings and not fully conscious beings in the same way that
the little blues are what we would call biological beings like us, reproducing?
Really?
But absolutely. Okay. Some of the very little short grays. You know, like in Richard Simon's case,
Mhm.
where he had the little grays surrounding him.
Yeah.
Right.
I suspect those were AI, and you
Mhm.
can kind of tell because they move very quickly. They're very businesslike.
Yeah.
And he said that a couple of times. He said they just had a job to do and they were doing it.
Right. Yeah.
They're not
Yeah.
super emotionally expressive
Mhm.
Uh-huh.
and do seem to follow orders of the mid-sized grays.
Yeah.
And from other cases like Dolly Saffron,
Mhm.
who, the book Symmetry, she said, oh yeah, and laid it out in black and white.
Yeah.
Whitley Strieber, of course, saw them stacked up like cordwood on
Right.
board a UFO, as did
Yeah.
Dolly. Saw them all locked
Yeah.
arms in a giant room.
Uh-huh.
She goes into detail about them. I do suspect those, 3 to 4 foot tall little grays
Mhm.
are what we would call biological androids.
Yeah. So they may have been the
Okay,
one.
Preston, I have a request. If we see you and Dolly at Christmas, I would like to see these 3 ETs again. Can you guys make that happen? Or should I start requesting it now?
That's on you, Trish. You
Oh,
have to
come on,
meditate.
help me.
Each of us has the responsibility to elevate our own psychic abilities and reach out to make contact, because that is one of the ET agendas, their goals, their missions, is to basically encourage people to elevate their own psychic abilities and reach out to them. They will meet you halfway, but you have to do the work, and you already are, so
Okay.
you're good.
It's been a while since it happened, so that's why I'm saying, okay, come on, let's speed this up here, guys.
Yeah. Yeah. I have one more follow-up question regarding the robotic beings, the little grays. There have been a number of documented cases of crashes and with beings being recovered. And you kind of wonder, so they come across from billions of miles or light years through dimensions, and then they crash on Earth. I've always wondered, maybe this was intentional and that those were robotic beings that were in there and recovered.
Yeah, I don't have any evidence or good reporting or any reason to believe that these are intentional crashes.
Really? Okay.
Because people have put that forth, and I would lean toward that being disinformation or just bad reporting.
Really?
From what I can understand, and I've talked to Dolly about this as well, and many contactees have told me this, that ETs fly their craft by harnessing the gravitational magnetic field lines of our planet, which, if you look into the science on this, and you can, don't believe me, look it up. It's very unstable. And this is, I think, the primary reason for UFO crashes. People are like, they've got such advanced technology. How could this possibly happen?
Yeah.
Well,
stuff happens.
we're going. Well, I mean, we're going through a transition of the magnetic poles right now. Which could possibly impact how they navigate.
100%. Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because that's exactly right.
Yeah.
And let's remember, if MUFON and Newport are getting 20 reports a day, which is about what they average, certainly in the past, and 1 in 100 people report anything to MUFON, I mean, this is an indication that UFO activity is far more common than is being publicly reported.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of these UFOs flying around.
Yeah.
And if 1 or 2 crash, well, it shouldn't come as any surprise. And when people are like, oh, they're coming from light years away, what are they doing? It must be hard to get here. Well, that's speculation. Apparently, I think we need to start looking directly to the contactees for information, not our governments, not scientists on TV who have never done their research or even seen a UFO, because the contactees are being told this. ETs have the ability to traverse interstellar distances very easily and quickly.
And they've taken some of the contactees along. You have stories where a guy taken, or I think maybe it was a woman who had taken, showing this is the planet where you are from, this green planet, and then suddenly you're zipped back to Earth, which, you know, they're probably light years away. So they have some way of moving dramatically, you know.
Well, look what happened to Dolly.
Distant. Yeah.
You know, I mean,
Dolly's a
she's
primary example.
Out
Yeah.
to Jupiter. Yeah.
Yeah, but the case you're talking about is Matteo from France.
Okay, yeah.
Which is a pseudonym.
Okay, yeah.
Because he's quite private. He still has family members. He just recently discussed it with his daughter. He's like, "Yeah, Dad, I've been having this for years. I'm fine with it." He's the one who's kind of trying to wrap his head around his experiences. But yeah, as a very young kid, he was taken on board and shown another planet and told it was his home.
Yeah,
it was amazing because he woke up that morning wondering about this, and his mom's like, "Honey,
I think he was only 4 years. I think he was only 4 years old. Yeah.
Yeah, but his mom's like, "Honey, where were you last night? You weren't in your bedroom." Mom,
I was on a spaceship.
Guess what? And she told him, "Honey, I'm going to tell you two things, and you need to remember this. One, don't tell anybody about this. Two, always remember it." And he took that to
Good
heart.
advice.
Yeah.
And one other thing real quick, I wanted to kind of whip it back around to the beginning of the podcast where talking about or the beginning of this episode talking about the makeup of you know, the beings that, you know, may or you know, that appear to be visiting us, and it reminded me of a post on believe it or not, NASA has a Tumblr account. And it it reminded me of a post they had that they made on Tumblr as it turns out about a year ago. I do want to say that this post assumes that there was a big bang. So if Jude, and I can't remember, y'all help me.
Caravan,
yeah.
Jude would disagree that it's the big switch, not the big bang.
The big breath.
But
the big breath,
big breath. But regardless, the post was the building blocks for humans and even our planet wouldn't exist if it weren't for stars. If we could rewind the universe back almost to the very beginning, we would see a sea of hydrogen, helium, and a tiny bit of lithium. The first generations of stars formed from this material. So there was a lot of heat and pressure in a star's core to fuse atoms together, forming new elements. Our DNA is made up of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and phosphorus. All those elements, except hydrogen, which has existed since shortly after the Big Bang, are made by stars and released into the cosmos when the stars die. So, point being is they're, you know, talking about shared DNA on the planet. There's certainly a case to be made for shared DNA throughout the universe. So
we're all stardust.
Yep.
Yeah, the subject of DNA is so fascinating because in some ways it's a very simple molecule with, I mean, for what, adenine, thymine, I forget the four basic molecules or proteins that form DNA, but even Watson and Crick, who won the Nobel Prize, I think, for discovering it, were absolutely impressed to the point like, we think this is probably designed by extraterrestrials. I mean, they went there.
They said that?
Yes.
Wow. Geez, that was a little early too.
So I found that fascinating because I do think that DNA is throughout the universe. This is certainly what contactees are being told.
If there's just a lot bigger picture than the small vision we have of reality and life on this planet. So, and just a matter. So we just have to tune into it and you know, to see that bigger vision and search for it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
If I can get these three guys to come back, Preston, I'm going to send them to your way.
Oh, anytime.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Preston. It's
Well,
been
wait,
great.
tell us where people could find you and your YouTube channel, all that.
Thanks, Trish. Yeah, I'm pretty easy to find on social media,
Yeah.
Yeah.
on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. I do have a YouTube channel and a
YouTube, yeah.
website. If you punch my name in on Google or Bing or whatever Yahoo search engines, you should be able to find me
Okay.
pretty easily. My books are available.
And his last name, spell your last name for people so they spell it
D,
right.
yeah, it's called Dennett. D as in David. ENNETT.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Now they'll remember that.
And
Okay,
and your
perfect.
podcast is called The Gate. Is that it?
Yeah, I do a weekly podcast with Dolly Saffron called The Light Gate. That's Monday
Light
evenings.
Gate.
The light gate. That's
Right.
Yeah, Monday
Yeah.
evening
We'll
at
see you on the
6 p.m. Pacific.
23rd, in fact.
Yeah. I think we're scheduled for the 23rd to be on there.
That's right.
Yeah.
I'm excited. I
Yeah.
get to
No,
turn the
looking
tables on
forward
you
to it.
guys.
now that's too. Do you have commercials during it? Are there breaks? We're on 2 hours. I don't know if we can talk for 2 hours straight.
Sure you can. We have one quick station break, but if you need to take a
Okay.
break at any time, of course you can.
All right. Okay. All right. Sounds good. We're looking forward to it.
Okay, can't wait. Preston, tell Dolly hi.
I sure will. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks very much.
See you soon.
Thank you.
Take care.